The rain came down in sheets that November evening in Spokane, Washington, turning the streets into rivers of black asphalt and reflecting neon. Marcus Henderson stood outside the quick-stop gas station on East Sprague Avenue, watching the water pool around his worn work boots. He'd been standing there for 20 minutes, staring at the payphone bolted to the brick wall, trying to work up the courage to make a call he should have made 3 years ago. Inside the store, fluorescent lights hummed and flickered. A teenager behind the counter scrolled through his phone, barely looking up when the occasional customer wandered in for cigarettes or lottery tickets. Outside, Marcus shivered despite his denim jacket. The cold wasn't just from the rain, it was the kind that settled in your bones when you knew you'd made choices you couldn't undo. If you're watching from somewhere in the world right now, go ahead and hit that subscribe button and drop a comment telling me where you're tuning in from. I'd love to know who's listening to this story. Marcus finally stepped toward the payphone, fishing quarters from his pocket. His hands shook as he lifted the receiver. It smelled like stale cigarette smoke and desperation. He'd memorized the number years ago, but his finger hesitated over each button. 3 years. 3 years since he'd walked out of his sister's house in Portland after the worst argument of their lives. 3 years since he'd seen his niece, Sophie, who'd been 7 then and would be 10 now. 3 years since he'd chosen the bottle over everything that mattered. Before he could dial, something wet and cold pressed against his leg. Marcus looked down to find a dog sitting beside him. Not just any dog. A border collie, black and white soaked through to the skin, with intelligent brown eyes that seemed to assess him with an almost human understanding. The dog's fur was matted with rain and mud, and a tattered rope hung from its collar, frayed at the end as if it had been chewed through. "Get out of here," Marcus muttered, turning back to the phone. But the dog didn't move. It sat there, perfectly still, water dripping from its muzzle, watching him with an intensity that made Marcus uncomfortable. He'd seen plenty of strays in his 2 years living rough in Spokane, but none had ever looked at him quite like this. He tried to ignore the animal and pressed the first number. The dog barked, not aggressively, but sharp and insistent. Once, twice, 3 times. "I said get lost!" Marcus raised his voice, and the teenager inside the store glanced up briefly before returning to his screen. The dog stood, moved between Marcus and the phone, and barked again. Then it did something strange. It grabbed the frayed end of its rope in its mouth and tugged, looking at Marcus, then down the street, then back at Marcus. The behavior was so deliberate, so purposeful, that Marcus found himself staring. "What?" he said aloud, feeling foolish for talking to a dog. "What do you want?" The border collie dropped the rope and barked again, louder this time. Then it took several steps away from the gas station toward the darker stretch of Sprague Avenue where the streetlights had burned out and the abandoned warehouses cast deep shadows. The dog looked back at Marcus, barked once more, and waited. Marcus had lived on the streets long enough to trust his instincts, and something in the dog's behavior triggered every alarm in his system. This wasn't random. This wasn't just some stray looking for food. The animal was trying to communicate something, and whatever it was, felt urgent. He let the phone receiver hang from its metal cord, swinging slightly in the wind. The dial tone droned on, that call to his sister still unmade. Maybe it was meant to stay that way tonight. Marcus stepped away from the gas station, following the dog. The border collie moved with purpose, trotting ahead, but constantly looking back to make sure Marcus followed. They left the dim glow of the quick stop behind, moving into the industrial section of East Spokane, where manufacturing plants had closed down years ago, leaving behind skeletal structures of corrugated metal and broken windows. The rain intensified, and Marcus pulled his jacket tighter, though it did little good against the November chill. "Where are you taking me?" Marcus called out, but the dog just kept moving, weaving between potholes filled with water that reflected the occasional streetlight still working in this forgotten part of town. They turned down an alley between two abandoned buildings. The pavement gave way to gravel and mud, and the sound of the rain changed, becoming muffled against brick and metal. Marcus's boots squelched with each step. Somewhere in the distance, a train whistle blew, long and mournful, heading east toward the Idaho border. The dog stopped suddenly, about 50 yards down the alley, near a dumpster overflowing with construction debris. It barked 3 times, sharp and commanding, then pawed at something on the ground that Marcus couldn't quite see in the darkness. What is it? Marcus approached cautiously, every instinct from his years on the street telling him to be careful. This could be a setup. He'd heard stories about people getting robbed in places like this, lured by elaborate schemes. But when he got closer and his eyes adjusted to the darkness, he saw what the dog had found, and his heart stopped. A child, a little girl, maybe 8 or 9 years old, lay crumpled against the brick wall, half hidden behind a pile of broken pallets. She wore a pink jacket that was now soaked black with rain, jeans and sneakers with cartoon characters on them. Her blonde hair was plastered to her face, and she wasn't moving. "Oh, God," Marcus breathed, dropping to his knees beside her. Hey, can you hear me?" The dog pressed against his side, whining now, a sound of distress that cut through the drumming rain. Marcus reached out with shaking hands, touching the girl's shoulder gently. She was cold, terribly cold, but when he pressed his fingers to her neck, he felt a pulse. Weak, but there. "She's alive," he said to the dog, though why he felt the need to report this to the animal, he didn't know. "She's alive, but she's hypothermic. We need to get help. Now." Marcus looked around frantically. The alley was empty, dark, isolated. No one would hear him if he shouted. He didn't have a cell phone, hadn't been able to afford one in years. The gas station was too far away, and he couldn't leave her here alone. Every second counted. He made a decision. Marcus shrugged off his denim jacket and wrapped it around the girl, then carefully lifted her into his arms. She was small, lighter than he expected, and her head lolled against his shoulder. The border collie stayed right beside him as he stood, and when Marcus started moving back down the alley toward the street, the dog led the way again, as if clearing a path. They moved faster now, Marcus's legs burning with the effort of carrying the child while navigating the treacherous ground. His mind raced. How long had she been out here? Who was she? Where did she come from? And why was she alone in an abandoned alley in this part of town? Back on Sprague Avenue, the lights of the quick stop beckoned like a lighthouse. Marcus ran, ignoring the pain in his chest, ignoring the rain that blinded him, ignoring everything except the need to get this child somewhere warm and safe. The dog ran alongside him, matching his pace perfectly, never leaving his side. He burst through the door of the gas station, and the teenager behind the counter jumped, his phone clattering to the floor. "Call 911!" Marcus shouted. "Now! This girl needs an ambulance!" The teenager stared, frozen for a moment that stretched too long. "I said call 911!" Marcus roared, and the kid finally grabbed the phone behind the counter, his fingers fumbling over the numbers. Marcus laid the girl on the floor as gently as he could, keeping his jacket wrapped around her. He checked her pulse again, still there, still weak. Her lips had a blue tinge that made his stomach turn. The border collie sat beside her head, as if standing guard, its eyes never leaving her face. "They're coming," the teenager said, his voice shaking. "They said 5 minutes. Is she okay?" "I don't know," Marcus said honestly. He rubbed the girl's arms through the jacket, trying to generate some warmth. "Come on, kid. Stay with us. Help's coming." The dog leaned down and gently licked the girl's forehead, a gesture so tender and deliberate that it made Marcus's throat tighten. This dog knew her. This wasn't a random stray that happened upon a random child. This border collie belonged to this little girl, or at least had some connection to her strong enough to drive it to find help. "What's your name?" Marcus whispered to the unconscious child. "Where do you live? Where are your parents?" The minutes crawled by with agonizing slowness. The teenager brought some paper towels, and Marcus used them to dry the girl's face as best he could. The border collie never moved, maintaining its vigil beside her, occasionally whining softly. Finally, sirens wailed in the distance, growing louder. Red and blue lights painted the gas station windows, and within seconds, paramedics were rushing through the door with equipment and urgent voices. "What happened?" a middle-aged woman in a paramedic uniform demanded as she knelt beside the girl, her partner already checking vitals. "I found her in an alley about 3 blocks east," Marcus said, backing away to give them room. "She was behind some pallets, unconscious. I don't know how long she'd been there." "Body temperature is 89 degrees, the male paramedic announced, wrapping the girl in thermal blankets. "Severe hypothermia. We need to transport immediately." They worked with practiced efficiency, lifting her onto a stretcher, starting an IV, radioing the hospital. Through it all, the border collie tried to follow, but one of the paramedics gently pushed it back. "Sorry, boy," he said. "You can't come in the ambulance." The dog barked, distressed, trying to push past. Marcus acted on instinct, grabbing the dog's makeshift rope collar. "I've got him," he told the paramedics. "Just take care of her." As they loaded the girl into the ambulance, Marcus saw her hand slip out from under the thermal blanket. On her wrist was a plastic hospital bracelet, the kind they give you when you're admitted. He couldn't read what it said from this distance, but it was a clue. She'd been in a hospital recently. The ambulance doors slammed shut, and the vehicle screamed away into the night, its sirens fading down Sprague Avenue. Marcus stood in the rain, still holding the border collie's rope, watching the red lights disappear. "You saved her life," the teenager said from the doorway of the gas station. "That dog brought you to her." Marcus looked down at the border collie, who was staring in the direction the ambulance had gone, ears pinned back, body trembling. "Yeah," Marcus said quietly. "He did." "You should go to the hospital," the teenager continued. "They'll want to talk to you, and besides, someone needs to know about the dog." Marcus nodded slowly. The hospital. He hadn't been inside a hospital since his last stint in rehab, 18 months ago, before he'd given up on trying to get clean and settled into the rhythm of street life. But the kid was right. He couldn't just walk away from this. And maybe, just maybe, this was why he hadn't made that phone call to his sister. Maybe he'd been meant to be standing outside that gas station at exactly that moment, in exactly that place, so this dog could find him. "Come on," Marcus said to the border collie, giving the rope a gentle tug. "Let's go find out who she is." The walk to Sacred Heart Medical Center took 40 minutes on foot, through rain that never let up. Marcus knew the route well. He'd walked it dozens of times over the past 2 years, usually heading to the emergency room with people from the homeless camps who'd gotten sick or hurt, making sure they didn't die on the streets before someone with credentials could help them. The hospital staff knew him by sight, though probably not by name. He was just another face from the margins of Spokane's forgotten population. The border collie walked beside him the entire way, never pulling on the rope, never trying to run off. Its coat was thoroughly soaked, but the dog didn't seem to care. It had a mission, and that mission wasn't finished yet. When they reached the emergency room entrance, Marcus hesitated. The automatic doors whooshed open, revealing bright lights, warm air, and the antiseptic smell that all hospitals shared. He looked down at his muddy boots, his soaked clothes, his rough appearance that screamed homeless to anyone who looked. Then he looked at the dog, whose eyes held that same intelligent intensity he'd first noticed at the gas station. "All right," Marcus said, mostly to himself. "Let's do this." Inside, the ER waiting room was moderately busy. A man holding a bloodied towel to his hand, a mother with a feverish toddler, an elderly woman in a wheelchair with an oxygen tank. The triage nurse, a stocky woman with grey hair pulled back in a tight bun, looked up as Marcus approached, her eyes flicking immediately to the dog. "No animals allowed," she said automatically. "I know. But this is about the girl who just came in," Marcus replied, his voice steadier than he expected. "The one they found in the alley. This is her dog. He's the one who found her." The nurse's expression shifted from bureaucratic annoyance to something else. Interest, maybe, or concern. "Wait here," she said, picking up a phone and turning away to speak quietly into the receiver. Marcus stood by the entrance, dripping water onto the industrial tile floor, the border collie sitting obediently beside him. The other people in the waiting room stared, but he ignored them. He'd gotten good at ignoring stares over the years. A minute later, a man in a white coat emerged from behind the double doors that led to the treatment area. He was in his 50s, with tired eyes and salt and pepper hair, and he carried himself with the authority of someone who'd spent decades in emergency medicine. "I'm Dr. Patterson," he said, extending a hand that Marcus shook after a moment's hesitation. "You're the one who brought in Emma Caldwell." "Emma," Marcus repeated, and the name suddenly made her reel in a way she hadn't been before. "Is she going to be okay?" "She's stable," Dr. Patterson said carefully. "We're warming her up gradually, and we're running tests. She's showing signs of malnutrition and dehydration beyond just tonight's exposure, which concerns us. But if you'd found her even an hour later, we'd be having a very different conversation. You saved her life." Marcus felt the words settle on him like a weight. "It wasn't me," he said, gesturing to the border collie. "It was the dog. He found me at a gas station and led me to her. I just followed." Dr. Patterson looked down at the border collie with new appreciation. "Dogs are remarkable animals," he said. "This one certainly is. Do you know if he belongs to the family?" "No idea," Marcus admitted. "But the way he's been acting, I'd say they're connected somehow. He won't leave her side, even now." "The police are on their way," Dr. Patterson said. "They'll want your statement about where you found her. And they'll need to track down her parents. The hospital bracelet she's wearing is from Deaconess Medical Center, but it's dated from 3 months ago. We're trying to pull up her records now." "3 months ago," Marcus echoed. "What was she in for?" "I can't discuss patient information," the doctor replied, but his expression suggested the answer wasn't good. "But I can tell you that her parents are James and Linda Caldwell, and the address on file is in Spokane Valley. We've been calling the number listed, but no one's answering." A cold feeling settled in Marcus's gut. A little girl wearing a hospital bracelet from 3 months ago, malnourished, alone in an alley in the middle of a rainstorm, and her parents aren't answering their phone. That doesn't sound good, Doc. "No," Dr. Patterson agreed quietly. "It doesn't." Before they could continue, the automatic doors opened again, and 2 police officers entered, shaking rain from their shoulders. One was a younger man, maybe 30, with a buzz cut and the rigid posture of someone new to the job. The other was a woman in her 40s, with sharp eyes and an air of competence that came from years of experience. "I'm Officer Chen," the woman said, approaching Marcus. "This is Officer Braddock. We need to ask you some questions about how you found Emma Caldwell." Marcus had dealt with police before, mostly negative encounters when they'd rousted him from places he'd been sleeping, occasionally less negative when he'd witnessed crimes and had actually been helpful. He knew how to talk to cops. Be direct. Be honest. Don't give them any reason to dig into your own life. He told them everything, starting with standing outside the gas station, the dog's insistent behavior, following it to the alley, finding Emma, carrying her back. Officer Chen took notes while Braddock listened, his hand resting on his duty belt, in a way that suggested he wasn't entirely comfortable with Marcus, despite the circumstances. "And you're sure you'd never seen her before?" Chen asked. "Never," Marcus confirmed. "I've been around Spokane for a couple years now, but I don't know the family, don't know anything about them." "Where do you live?" Braddock asked, his tone just slightly too sharp. "Around," Marcus said carefully. "I move between places. I'm not always in one spot." "So you're homeless," Braddock stated, making it sound like an accusation. "I'm between permanent addresses," Marcus replied, meeting his eyes steadily. "Does that matter? I found a little girl dying in an alley and brought her somewhere safe. Isn't that what matters?" "What my partner means," Chen interjected smoothly, shooting Braddock a warning look, "is that we need to establish a complete picture of the situation. You're not in any trouble, Mr. Henderson, Marcus Henderson. Mr. Henderson, you did the right thing tonight and we appreciate it, but we need to understand what Emma was doing in that alley, how long she'd been there, and where her parents are." "The dog might know," Marcus said, looking down at the border collie who'd been sitting patiently through the entire conversation. "He found her. Maybe he knows where she came from." Officer Chen crouched down to examine the dog, noting the frayed rope, the matted fur, the alert intelligence in its eyes. "No tags," she observed, "just this rope tied to his collar. The collar's leather, good quality, but old. This dog's been on his own for a while, I'd guess." "Or with Emma," Marcus suggested. "Or with Emma," Chen agreed, standing. "Dr. Patterson, has the girl regained consciousness?" "Not yet," the doctor said. "We're keeping her sedated while we stabilize her core temperature. When she wakes up, she'll be able to tell us what happened, but that might not be for several hours." "Then we need to go to the family's house," Chen said to Braddock. "The address in Spokane Valley. Something's very wrong here, and we need to figure out what before anyone else gets hurt." She turned back to Marcus. "Mr. Henderson, you're free to go. We have your statement, and we know where to find you if we have more questions." "I don't have a phone," Marcus said, "but I'm usually in the area around East Sprague. Ask around at St. Margaret's shelter. They know me there." "Thank you," Chen said, and she seemed to mean it. "You did something remarkable tonight." After the officers left, Marcus stood in the ER waiting room, suddenly uncertain what to do. The adrenaline that had carried him through the last hour was fading, leaving behind exhaustion and the familiar ache of his life's reality. He could go back to the gas station, try to make that call to his sister again. He could head to one of the shelters and try to get a dry place to sleep. He could just walk back out into the rain and disappear into the night like he usually did. But the border collie was looking at him with those impossibly intelligent eyes, and Marcus couldn't shake the feeling that this wasn't over. Not yet. "Can I see her?" he asked Dr. Patterson, who was still standing nearby, reviewing something on a tablet. "Just for a minute. I just want to know she's okay." The doctor hesitated, then nodded. 5 minutes. And the dog stays in the hallway. I can't bend that rule too far. Marcus followed Dr. Patterson through the double doors, the border collie trotting alongside until they reached a room where a nurse gently but firmly stopped the dog from entering. The border collie whined, a sound of pure distress, but sat obediently in the hallway, watching through the doorway. Inside, Emma Caldwell lay on a hospital bed, surrounded by machines that beeped and hummed. Thermal blankets cocooned her body, and an IV dripped steadily into her arm. Her face, now cleaned of mud and rain, was pale and delicate, with a sprinkling of freckles across her nose. She looked peaceful, like she was just sleeping, but Marcus could see the dark circles under her eyes and the hollow quality to her cheeks that spoke of prolonged hardship. "What happened to you?" Marcus whispered, though he knew she couldn't hear him. "Where are your parents? Why were you alone out there?" There was no answer, of course. Just the steady beep of the heart monitor and the soft whoosh of the warming blanket's air system. "Time's up," Dr. Patterson said gently from the doorway. Marcus took one last look at Emma, then left the room. The border collie immediately pressed against his leg, and together they walked back through the ER, past the triage desk, and out into the rain that still fell in relentless sheets.